I'm Favor Egon from Nigeria. So, from the first day of this seminar, the issue of the extensive network of the LTTE has been a recurring statement. I equally see it as one of the most difficult and most pressing challenges of the present government of Sri Lanka. The Secretary, Minister of Defense, equally mentioned it in his keynote address yesterday, and equally mentioned it to the Minister of External Affairs to see what they can do about it. So my question is, what concerted efforts are being taken to counter the propaganda of the LTTE, especially from the international, from the foreign countries? Thank you very much.
What is required is an objective presentation of the facts. There is no need for embroidery or
Yes.
what we need to know is the facts. Sorry. What has been the record of the LTTE? As Dr. Amanugama pointed out, what would have been the consequences had we not taken the action we did? We also need to explain to the world that the military option was by no means the first option. For a very long period, every conceivable effort was made to resolve the problem by negotiation, by discussion. But the LTTE never engaged seriously at any time for one clear reason. That is, the LTTE believed that they were militarily invincible. They believed that. As the rest of the world did as well. So then their logic was, why should we settle for something limited when we can have a separate state? So we need to project these circumstances to the world. Then all the misunderstanding, all the false propaganda about the closing stages of the war, that was without any doubt the largest hostage situation in contemporary military history. 300,000 people on a narrow strip of land between the lagoon and the sea. People who were being held as human shields, wanting very much to reach government-controlled territory where they had everything waiting for them. Now, what would a responsible government do? Simply turn a blind eye, leave them to their fate? Is that compatible with the basic obligations of the state? So these are things we need to explain. And now, the propaganda war, that's also a kind of war. It is not a military operation. It is an operation that is designed to destroy the country's economy by discouraging investment, preventing tourists from coming into this country, by frightening them. And we need to explain to the world, I would say the most important thing is to explain to the world that human rights is today being used selectively as a political tool. I mean, that is the reality of the matter. It's not only Sri Lanka that is affected, there are many other countries that are bearing the brunt of this. A highly subjective, a highly selective application of human rights in order to achieve political objectives. So I think we need objectively, very clearly, not emotionally, cerebrally and logically to present these things to the world. Now, I don't know whether you are aware that the Human Rights Council came into being because the General Assembly felt strongly that its predecessor, the Human Rights Commission, was unduly politicized. They said so. They said, we have a Human Rights Commission, we are not satisfied the way it is working, because there is prejudgment. Issues are not looked at on their merits. So said the General Assembly. They therefore did away with the Human Rights Commission and brought into existence a new mechanism, which they thought would be an improvement on its predecessor. Now, is that the case? The empirical evidence is very much the contrary. So these are things that we need to explain. to the world outside. And I can tell you that that is making a difference. More and more people are sitting up and asking themselves whether what is happening is fair, is that the right way to treat a country emerging from this painful conflict, and setting a course for the future. So we are achieving a measure of understanding. There is a great deal of empathy all over the world. I have come across that in recent months wherever I travel. So we need to persevere. We must not lose heart. The forces pitted against us are strong forces. We must not underestimate that. In terms of money, in terms of influence, they are formidable. But I think justice and truth are on our side, and we need to forge ahead.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Commander Imran from Pakistan Navy. Just taking lead from the previous discussion, I'd just like to ask something similar. Is that presently we see the Tamil diaspora very active internationally and somehow operating from certain countries. So my question pertains to the fact that in this present situation, the responsibility of respective countries appears that they somehow, and they are acknowledging, to be honest, they somehow acknowledge the facts which have been done here in this country and do not allow their own soils, respective soils, to be used against this country or any other country for the propaganda. So my question is that, under this situation, doesn't it make the foreign relations somehow complex and challenging for Sri Lanka today? And if possible, if the Honorable Minister could kindly highlight, if possible, the latent reasons of certain factions of the international community to doubt or question the happenings here during the last 30 years. Thank you, sir.
I mean, look at the facts. See, the LTTE has been militarily defeated. But that does not mean that the vast resources which they accumulated over 30 years have not gone away. The LTTE is very much in possession of those enormous resources. I mean, don't forget that they own ships, they own banks. Today, even yesterday, somebody was remarking to me in England how many petrol stations they own. They own a very large number of petrol stations in the United Kingdom, so they own real estate. In terms of money, in terms of assets, they are a very wealthy organization. Now also consider this. When the military operations were on, they had the money, they extorted the money, but they also had expenses. You know, they had to invest in sophisticated weaponry. The LTTE is the only terrorist organization that ever had air capability. No other terrorist organization had air capability. Okay, air capability meaning 4 small aircraft. But even that nobody else had. So at that time, they had income, they had expenses. Now there are no expenses. They don't have to spend any money purchasing aircraft parts or submarines or ships. So that money is in their hands. What is happening to that money? What are they doing with it? They are buying influence. That is what they are doing. And they are a very useful and valuable resource to many people. People who are politically influential. And the LTTE organizations connected to that are making a massive investment in the domestic politics of many countries. I'm referring to the West. Many countries in the West, they are making a very substantial investment. And it's not just a matter of votes, it's not a matter of counting of heads. In some marginal constituencies in some countries, they can make a difference at a closely fought election, but it's not just that. It is a problem of far wider dimensions. They are well plugged into the system, their organizational capability, very useful for politicians. So that is the source of the LTTE's strength. So we need to counter that. And as I said, we have to rely on the justice of our cause and articulate it as best we can in order to convince those with open minds. And today more and more people are getting weary of this philosophy of the philosophy of do-gooders, active intervention. That is not a popular philosophy anymore. So we need to tap into that and further the interests of our country in that way.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I am Brigadier Nakibus Lakara from Uganda. I would love, first of all, to join the minister in agonizing over how military operations of the Sri Lankan army in the northern province of Sri Lanka becomes an intrusion. Is northern Sri Lanka a separate state? Is the northern province a separate state? For somebody to make a comment of intrusion, I think even the international system must be questioned. That is my comment on that. Now, there are, in the previous presentations, one, separatist ideology is given as a threat. The tasks that are there is one, to prevent the re-emergence of terrorism, and two, prevention of further ethnic divisions as tasks that are outstanding for you to fulfill. Now, what are, now to ask the minister, the honorable minister, I think it's applicable to both. Well, how do you fight this? You have a hostile media that is on putting you on the back foot, both locally and internationally. What strategies have you put in place to fight that? Have we in Sri Lanka tried some kind of appeasement? One, integration of reformed members of the LTT. Reformed. This is one way you can fight these guys. Reformed into the system. And two, some form of political inclusion of reformed members also of these separatists in the establishment of the government of Sri Lanka. I think this would go a long way in trying to deny them the fertile ground locally as you move towards destroying and disrupting those external bases. Thank you.
Well, you asked about the status of the northern province. It cannot be a separate state because in terms of Article 2 of Sri Lanka's constitution, the Republic of Sri Lanka is a unitary state that is explicitly declared by Article 2 of the constitution of the country. Now, I do know personally that there is a great deal of interest all over the world in the techniques, the methodologies that were employed by the Sri Lankan armed forces in accomplishing something that was thought to be impossible. There's a great deal of interest in military academies, in universities, in think tanks, all over the world. There is a great deal of interest. I'm not qualified to answer a question on the methods because I have no military knowledge or background. But certainly I think there is a need for Sri Lanka to share that expertise with other countries. Terrorism, about 3 years ago, the leaders of SAARC countries identified 3 priorities for this entire region. The 3 priorities were in that order: terrorism, food security, and energy security. So these are problems that are common to all of us. And none of these countries, not only in South Asia, but anywhere in the world, no country can develop unless terrorism is overcome. So this is a universal problem. And today, violence is one of the major tragedies of the world. It is a principal impediment to human progress. And since Sri Lanka has achieved something truly remarkable, I think there is a duty cast upon us to share that experience with the rest of the world, and that is being done. The Sri Lankan armed forces are making their knowledge available widely, and I think that should be treated as a matter of considerable priority.